Today we're making this cute tabletop pumpkin decoration. It can be used for Halloween or just for fall. I've provided a pattern for you, which I'll talk about how to get the links to the pattern in the video, so stay tuned and see how fun and easy this is to make. All right, so this is another project where I have created a pattern for you that you can either cut out by hand from a PDF that I've created, and the link to download that will be in the blog post. And I've also created a PNG file that can be used with an electronic cutting machine, which is how I cut mine, just to make sure the cutting pattern was going to come out correct, and it cuts really well. The one hint I would have is before you remove the pieces from your cutting mat, after you run them through your machine, I put a dot on the top of each one. That way I know I'm stacking my pieces up with the same side correctly, rather than trying to put one together backwards. So let's glue these pieces together. Oh, in addition to the pattern pieces, there's 9 pieces to the pattern. You'll also need a piece of craft stick or something else as a base, and this is cut 1 inch. And those dimensions, everything will be in the blog post. Now I have some tacky glue. I'm going to squeeze some tacky glue out on my tray. It's a nice thick tacky glue. So I'm going to start with the pieces that have the stem for the pumpkin, and just going to put a nice even coat. Now if you have a glue stick that you feel comfortable using, I have never really gotten a glue stick to work. I've had too many times where I've used a glue stick and it's failed. It's come apart later, so I tend to not really trust glue sticks for projects that I want to have long term. I prefer to use a nice thick tacky glue and spread it all the way to the edges with a toothpick or something, and make sure that I've got a good coverage, and I just have better luck that way. So we're going to line that up and line this up. And I know white on white, it's a little difficult. After we paint these, they'll be a lot easier to see. So let's go ahead and do the face. And this decoration, I decided to design it so it's reversible. One side has a jack-o'-lantern face and one side doesn't. That way, I did that because I was thinking about when my kids were little, I had a ceramic pumpkin that I always put out in the fall. And it had a jack-o'-lantern face on one side. So what I would do is I would put it out in September with that face pointing towards the wall, and then when October came around, I would turn him around with the jack-o'-lantern face out, and then November I would turn him back around again. That way he was out all fall, but he was only a jack-o'-lantern for 1 month. So I thought that would be a way to use this too. You can use it all fall in the dollhouse. Now I thought I got all the pieces of the eyes out, but I think I missed one. There we go. All right. Line it up as best you can, and then we've only got one more group here, and these pieces, you'll want them to dry pretty well before we go on, because we want to make sure that they are nice and solid and glued together. Now if you haven't done projects like this with the cardstock, this is just regular medium weight cardstock. I find it works really well. It makes a really strong display that holds up really well, providing you glue it together really well, paint it and all of that stuff. Now I do use white and paint it to the color I want rather than using a colored cardstock, partly because I find that the paint doesn't fade as much as colored cardstock generally does. Now off camera I'm going to have to get this worked around so the edges are even, but I am going to tweak my edges off camera and let these dry, and when these pieces are dry I'll come back and we will start painting. All right, my glue is set overnight, so now we need to start painting, and I'll show you how to start. I'll finish this up off camera so you don't have to watch every bit of it. Make sure you get the edges, including the interior cuts on the face. And we might need more than one coat of paint, and be sure and poke out the openings. I'll do that a little bit better off camera so you don't have to watch every bit of that. Now on the pumpkin, don't worry about painting the stem on the big piece. But get the edges and the whole surface. We are going to come back and put 2 more colors on that big one. And then this one. The 2 small pieces, you only need to paint the one side. But make sure you have a good solid coat of paint, and that you have, the interior edges on the face are really important. The exterior edges, not quite as much, because we are going to probably touch up the paint after it dries. So I am going to let this dry and put a second coat on, then flip over the big one and put a couple of coats on the back side. And when that is all dry, I'll come back and we will go on to the next step. All right, I've got my orange paint done for now. We will come back to the orange in a little bit after we glue it together to do any touch-ups. So now I have some green. This is the bright green we've been using on our Halloween stuff, and a fairly small brush. Because what we are going to do is we are going to paint the stem, and make sure you get the size. Oops, my hands are shaking. Great. Maybe that extra cup of coffee wasn't a good idea. And it's okay if you get down into the pumpkin a ways, because it's going to be covered up. Make sure you get the edges. And then I'm going to put this here. No, I don't want to use that. I'll use a toothpick. I'm going to lay it on a toothpick so that, I'll use the round one. It's a little thicker. That way my green stem with the wet paint on the back doesn't get down on my tray. And then we're going to let that dry. Once that's dry enough to handle a bit, we are going to add the back color for behind our jack-o'-lantern face. So I'll be right back. All right, now that the orange paint and the green paint are both dry, we are going to take some yellow, and I've got some apple barrel in bright yellow. All the paints I'm using today and the brushes were sent by Plaid for use in making videos for you guys, so please support the Plaid company. Go out and buy some of their paints and stuff so that they can keep providing them for creators. So I am going to paint a big blob. Now don't worry about this coming out further than the piece we're going to put on top. And this is kind of a transparent color, so I'm going to have to put on several coats, but that's okay. We are going to touch up the orange paint when we get this all put together. We're going to put another coat of orange on top. So I will let this dry. When this coat dries, I'll put a second coat on, and possibly a third, since this is pretty translucent, but I wanted a really bright yellow, and my other yellows were not bright enough, I didn't think. So I'll let this dry, I'll get it up to where I want it, and then I'll come back and we can start assembly. All right, our paint is all dry, so we're going to now glue everything together. So this yellow spot is, make sure that you've got enough area covered that you won't have orange showing underneath. It looks like I've got a little, that eye hole is not quite as big there. No, it's fine. And spread some glue on the back of your little face. And then turn it around. And I've got a couple of green spots there because I was checking my green paint earlier and I picked that up and managed to get green on the orange. So I had to do a little touch-up paint, and it's okay because we're going to do some more touch-up. I'm going to turn that around so that part is down there. Get these right where you want them. And let that glue dry, and once that's dry, we can go ahead and do some touching up. Now, let's go ahead and put make a stained finish on our base. And to do that, I've got just some, this is Liquitex Basics in Burnt Umber. And this is really thick paint. I'm just going to use it on my finger today. I'm going to get it all over my fingers anyway, so I might as well just go with it and start out with it on my fingers. One of the things I love about this paint is because it is so thick, it looks like a wood stain when you rub it on like that. And once you put a clear finish on, that is gorgeous. I love the finish it gives on wood like that. So I'm going to let these dry. When this glue is dried up enough that we won't disturb it, I'm going to come back, we'll do some touch-up painting, then we can assemble our tabletop decoration. All right, now that my glue has dried, pull my brush out. And by the way, I kept my brush wrapped in a wet wipe, so it's still nice and ready to go. And since I know everything is dry, I'm just using straight off of the paint jar lid. I'm feeling lazy this week. And what I'm doing is just touching up any places where the paint is not the color I want it. I'm not going to worry too much about the very bottom, but the areas leading up. And I also want to put a little bit of paint where those pieces join there. All right, that looks pretty good. So we'll let that paint dry. I can go clean my paintbrush now. And when that gets dry, we can attach our pumpkin to our stand. So I'll be right back. All right, so everything is dry. So now we need to glue it to its stand. Now mine is not wanting to stand up, and that's okay. I've got some sandpaper here. Hold it straight up and down and sand it until it's flat and wants to stand. There, now it stands. I forgot to put glue out, and I think that's, yeah, that's skinned over. So a little bit of glue. I'm going to dip this, just the base, in the glue. Put it as close to the center as you can, and then, whoops, I will fiddle with it off camera to make sure it is centered the way I want it, since I've got it where more you can see it than I can. I'm going to let this glue dry, and when it's dry, we will come back and put a clear finish on. So I'll be right back. All right, my glue is dried, so I'm going to put this onto this craft stick that has a little bit of that blue poster tack stuff on it. This way I can get this painted with the finish without getting stuff all over my fingers. I've got some satin Mod Podge out on a little palette, and I've got a brush. And I'm just going to put a nice light, even coat. Don't put too much on because remember, Mod Podge has a tendency to remain sticky. If it's too thick, satin is not as bad as gloss for that, but it still can happen. So I am going to get a nice even coat. I'm going to work with this until it's nice and even, and I'm going to let it dry. And when this Mod Podge is dry, we'll take a look at our tabletop pumpkin decorations. I'll be right back. Well, here is our finished jack-o'-lantern side of our tabletop pumpkin and the back side. I love how this turned out. I think this will be fun to put on like an entry table or anywhere in the dollhouse, Be sure and check the blog post for photos and colors and sizes and everything, and the link to the downloadable patterns so that you can make your own. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, hit the like button. Leave me a comment. What kinds of themes would you like to see in future videos? If you enjoy my content and haven't subscribed, I encourage you hit the subscription button and the notification bell so you know when I put up my next video. Thank you very much for watching today, and I will talk to you next time. Bye!